Have you ever watched a man you once knew, someone familiar, someone present, someone woven into the fabric of your daily life, suddenly begin to disappear, not physically, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, as if he were a tide pulling back from a shore it had touched for years? He stops returning calls the way he used to. He shows up to gatherings less. When he does appear, there is something different behind his eyes. A kind of stillness, a distance that was not there before. And then one day you realize he has simply gone. Not with a dramatic exit, not with a final argument, but with a slow and deliberate withdrawal from almost everything he once called his world. Or perhaps you are not watching this happen to someone else. Perhaps you are the man I am describing. Perhaps there have been moments. Quiet evenings, long drives, the spaces between one obligation and the next, when something inside you has stirred and said, I do not want to keep doing this. I do not want to keep showing up to places that do not feel like mine. I do not want to keep performing the version of me that everyone expects. And you did not know what to do with that feeling, so you pushed it down, kept going, and told yourself something must be wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if, from a psychological standpoint, specifically from the lens of one of the most profound minds in the history of depth psychology, what you are experiencing is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough? What if the withdrawal, the silence, the cutting off is not the symptom of a problem, but the beginning of something that cannot begin any other way? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, spent his life mapping the inner terrain of the human psyche. He studied what happens when people stop living on the surface and begin moving towards something deeper. And one of the things he observed again and again was that the most significant turning points in a person's psychological life do not come wrapped in light and warmth. They come wrapped in confusion, in exhaustion, in the feeling that everything familiar has stopped fitting, in the urge to pull back, go quiet, and let the old world fall away. What I want to do here is help you understand what is actually happening inside the men who cut off everything. And if you are one of them, I want to give you language for something you may have been living without words for. So stay with me, because what follows might not just explain someone you know, it might explain you. The first thing that happens, often before a man can even articulate it, is a quiet and unsettling recognition. He looks around at the relationships he has built, the friendships, the social circles, the roles he has occupied for years, and something inside him says, I do not recognize myself here anymore. This is not bitterness. It is not resentment. It is something more disorienting than either of those, because at least bitterness has a target and resentment has an edge. What this man feels is more like looking in a mirror and seeing someone he knows but cannot quite claim. The face is right, the mannerisms are familiar, but the interior, the part that is supposed to be alive and present, feels absent. For years, perhaps decades, he has been building and maintaining a version of himself that works in social space. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we construct to navigate the world, to be liked, to be trusted, to fulfill the roles that our relationships and communities require of us. The persona is not inherently dishonest. It is necessary. We all wear one. We learn early that certain parts of us are welcomed and certain parts are not, and we adjust accordingly. We become the responsible one, the funny one, the reliable one, the strong one. We learn what to show and what to hide. The problem is not the persona itself. The problem is what happens when it grows too large, too rigid, too dominant. When a man has worn the mask for so long that he can no longer tell where the mask ends and he begins. When the role has expanded to the point of replacing the person. When every conversation, every room he walks into, every relationship he maintains requires him to be the old version of himself. The version that was built to fit, not to live. Jung wrote that the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. Read that slowly. What others think you are, and what you yourself have come to think you are. The persona at its worst becomes a kind of internal colonization, where the external image takes over the inner territory so completely that the man living inside it becomes a stranger to himself. And when that recognition arrives, the natural response is withdrawal, not because he wants to punish anyone, Not because he has stopped caring, but because continuing to show up in relationships that require him to be the old version feels, at a very deep level, like self-erasure, like agreeing to keep disappearing so that others can keep recognizing him. The exhaustion that comes with this is particular and hard to explain. It is not the tiredness of doing too much. It is the tiredness of performing too long, of walking into every room already knowing which version of yourself you are supposed to bring, of laughing at the right moments, saying the right things, nodding in the right places, and leaving feeling more empty than when you arrived, even though by every external measure everything was fine. That emptiness is the signal. That emptiness is the psyche saying, "This is not working anymore." Not because the relationships are broken, but because the shape you have taken inside them no longer matches the shape you are growing into. Once that light turns on, once he sees clearly that what people know and love is a curated construction, a role he has been faithfully playing rather than the living, complicated person underneath, there is almost no way to unsee it. The mask begins to loosen, and the more it loosens, the harder it becomes to keep wearing it voluntarily. This is the first movement of what Jung called individuation. Not the grand transformation, not the dramatic awakening, but the quiet, destabilizing recognition that the life you have been living on the surface does not match the life that is trying to emerge from within. If you have ever left a conversation feeling lonelier than before it started, that is what I am pointing to. If you have ever sat in a room full of people who like you and felt completely unseen, that is what I am describing. If you have ever caught yourself performing friendship, performing confidence, performing okayness, while something underneath whispered that you were tired of pretending, you have touched the edge of this. You do not have to do anything with it right now. You do not have to make a decision or change anything. You only need to recognize it, because recognition is where everything begins. If this is landing for you, I want to ask you to do something simple before we go further. Leave a comment. Just one line. Anything this brought up for you. Like this if it resonates. And follow so you don't miss what comes next. You are not alone in this. There are more of us walking this road than most people realize. When a man begins to lose himself in his own relationships, what usually follows is not a sudden decision to leave. It is a slow accumulation of evidence, a pattern that becomes undeniable over time. He keeps giving, and the giving keeps flowing one way. And at some point, the body and the soul register what the mind has been reluctant to admit, that he is being drained. And the drainage has been going on so long it has started to feel normal. Jung approached psychic energy with the same rigor that physicists approach physical energy. He called it libido. Not in the narrowly sexual sense, but in the broader sense of vital energy, the force that drives engagement with life. In a healthy relational system, that energy moves in both directions. There is giving and receiving, pouring out and taking in. When that balance exists, relationships feel nourishing. When the balance breaks, when one person consistently supplies while the other receives, the relationship stops being a meeting between two people and becomes an extraction. For many men, this pattern begins long before they are aware of it. It often starts in childhood, where being useful, being helpful, being the one who holds things together was the surest way to earn love and remain connected. The lesson learned early, often without words, is this: your value lies in what you do for others, not in who you are. And that lesson follows a man into every friendship, every relationship, every space he inhabits for the rest of his life, unless something cracks it open. So he becomes the one who answers at midnight, the one who listens to the same story for the fourth time without complaint, the one who shows up when things fall apart and quietly rebuilds when no one is watching. He does this naturally, without bargaining, without demanding, because somewhere inside he believes that giving is how belonging works. That connection is earned through service. That love is a transaction where his currency is availability. Jung observed a specific psychological pattern in people who live this way. The archetype of the wounded healer, the person who has not faced their own wound, and so they pour themselves into the wounds of others, not entirely out of generosity, but out of an unconscious need to be needed, to justify their presence, to feel that their existence has value. The giving in this light is not purely selfless, it is also a survival strategy, a way of securing connection by making oneself indispensable. That moment of seeing clearly is both a gift and a wound. The gift is clarity. The wound is what the clarity reveals. that many of the connections he has invested in most deeply were built on his function, not on who he is, and the people in them. Even genuinely good people, even people who care, have become so accustomed to him being the supplier that they have lost the capacity to see him as someone who also needs to receive. When he stops being available in the old way, when he stops picking up every call, stops offering his energy before anyone has asked whether he has any left, the reactions he receives confirm what he suspected. People do not ask if he is okay. They become distant. Some become quietly angry, as if he has broken an unspoken rule, and what that reaction reveals is not cruelty but dependency. They did not know him. They knew his function, and his function has changed. The withdrawal looks like coldness from the outside. It looks like he has changed, become selfish, stopped caring. But from the inside, it is something else entirely. It is a man learning, perhaps for the first time, that his presence has value regardless of what he produces, that he is allowed to exist without earning it. That love, real love, the kind worth having, does not require him to pay for it in exhaustion. Connected to this pattern of giving too much is another dynamic that runs beneath it like a current. For as long as he has been giving, he has also been watching for approval, watching to see if he did it right, watching for the nod, the smile, the validation that confirmed he was on the right track, that he was acceptable, that he was enough. This need for external validation creates a specific kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of never being fully present, because a part of you is always monitoring, always reading the room, always adjusting. You are never quite here, because a part of you is always over there, watching yourself from the outside, making sure you are being seen correctly. Jung was direct about this. He said that the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem, not the acceptance of others, not earning the approval of the world, the acceptance of oneself. Because until a man can stand in that, until he can know himself from the inside rather than measuring himself by external mirrors, he will always be at the mercy of whoever happens to be looking at him in a given moment. The shift away from this pattern rarely comes from a decision. It comes from a breaking, a moment when the system of external validation fails so completely that there is nothing left to do but look inward. It might be the person he worked hardest to please who turns on him. It might be the community he sacrificed most for that does not show up when he needs them. It might simply be the accumulation of years of reaching outward for something that keeps moving, keeps receding, keeps proving impossible to hold permanently. In that moment of collapse, something unexpected can happen. When the external mirrors disappear, when approval is no longer available, no longer consistent, some men discover that they are still there, that the ground beneath them did not crumble just because no one was looking, that something in them knows its own value, even without confirmation. And that discovery, quiet, tentative, unfamiliar, is the beginning of an entirely different way of existing in the world. So he stops explaining himself. He stops justifying his choices. He stops trying to make people understand his need for distance, not out of arrogance, but because he has slowly come to understand that those who truly belong in his life will not require that explanation. And those who can only stay when he is performing for them were never really present to begin with. There is real grief in the moment a man realizes that some of the relationships he cherished most were built, at least in part, on a version of him that was not entirely real. That the closeness he felt was closeness to the mask rather than to the person beneath it. That loss is genuine and deserves to be felt, not skipped over in the rush toward growth. But on the other side of that grief is something worth moving toward, a life in which he is not constantly auditioned, in which his presence is welcome not because of what he produces, but because of who he is. That life requires him to first become someone who knows who he is. And that begins with the willingness to stop outsourcing that knowledge to other people. When a man stops needing external validation, the experience of being alone begins to change. What once felt like a gap, a space that needed to be filled, begins to feel different, more habitable, more honest. And eventually, for men who move through this transition fully, it becomes something actively chosen, not endured. Chosen. There is an important distinction that most people miss. There is a difference between isolation that comes from avoidance, from fear of intimacy, from the inability to connect, and solitude that is chosen from a position of inner strength. The first, is a running away. The second is a moving toward oneself, toward silence that is not empty but full of clarity, toward the kind of inner conversation that can only happen when the noise of constant social performance has been quieted enough to hear it. Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Many men who withdraw from their social circles are not, in the deepest sense, lonely. They may be more genuinely present to their own interior life than they have been in years. What they are moving away from is the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people to whom they cannot say what is real. That loneliness, the loneliness of being unseen inside a crowd, is far more corrosive than the solitude of being physically alone. When he chooses to be alone, he is not rejecting people. He is refusing a specific kind of company that requires him to be absent from himself. And in the space that opens when that company is no longer filling every hour, something happens that could not happen in the noise. He begins to hear himself, his real thoughts, not the thoughts he performed because they were expected, his real values, the ones that have been quietly shifting, the ones he has not been able to honor because he was too busy being the person everyone else needed him to be. His social circle becomes smaller. This is almost inevitable. When a man stops performing and starts being honest, many connections that were built on the performance cannot survive. They were never built for this version of him. And that thinning can look from the outside like isolation or failure. But from the inside, it is often experienced as relief, as honesty finally being possible. What comes next, and this is the part that matters, is not permanent withdrawal. It is a rebuilding, a slower, more deliberate, more honest way of relating. He connects less, but what he builds when he connects is built on something solid. There is no performance in it, no transaction, no unspoken contract requiring either person to be less than they are. And those connections, when they come, fewer, quieter, more real, sustain him in a way the hundreds of shallow ones never could. The quality of connection changes when its foundation is truth rather than convenience. When two people are together not because it is expected or comfortable or habitual, but because something genuine in one recognizes something genuine in the other. The relationship has a different texture entirely. It breathes, it grows, it can hold difficulty without collapsing. If you are in that thinning period right now, watching connections drift, wondering if something is wrong with you, hear this. The thinning is not the end, it is the clearing. And what grows in cleared ground tends to be stronger and more honest than what grew in the crowded space before. Drop a comment if this is where you are. Just tell me. Are you in the thinning, the solitude, or have you come through it and found something real on the other side? Your words matter to every person who reads them and realizes they are not alone. Like this, follow, and let's keep going. But not every withdrawal is purely a philosophical awakening. Sometimes underneath it there is pain, specific pain, the kind that comes not from a gradual drift away from authenticity, but from a moment, a crack, a betrayal so deep that it restructures the way a man sees every relationship from that point forward. Betrayal is one of the most under-examined wounds in men's psychology, in part because it is rarely spoken of. Men are not widely encouraged to describe the experience of being genuinely, deeply betrayed, of having placed trust fully in someone and had that trust used against them. And so the wound gets buried, covered with distance, with silence, with a watchfulness that people around him interpret as coldness, but which is at its core self-protection. Betrayal in the deepest sense is not simply being let down. Everyone gets let down. Betrayal happens specifically at the point of maximum vulnerability, when he has opened something real, trusted something real, given access to his actual interior world, and the person he trusted turns that access into a weapon, abandons him at the exact moment connection was most needed, or chooses their own advantage over the loyalty that closeness implied. The specificity of the betrayal is what makes it so structuring. It is not a general lesson about the world being unsafe. It is a precise lesson about what happens when you trust. And the lesson lands at the deepest level because it came from someone who was supposed to be on his side. Not a stranger, not an adversary. Someone he loved, someone he defended, someone he would have protected with everything he had. That is what restructures him. Not the event itself, but the source of it. After that, the innocence is gone, not the capacity for connection. That remains, even if it is quiet and careful and slow to emerge, but the kind of naive openness that allows someone to extend trust without evidence, to assume good faith as a default, that is gone. And it cannot simply be restored by deciding to trust again. It has to be rebuilt, slowly, through experiences that demonstrate again and again that trust, in this specific case, is warranted. What this looks like from the outside is guardedness, a reluctance to open up that others may read as arrogance or emotional unavailability. But what it is proportionate caution. Is it not strange that we would expect a man who has been seriously burned to immediately return to the fire without hesitation? And yet that is often what is implicitly demanded of men who have been betrayed. Move on, get over it. Don't let it make you closed off. The closing off is not pathological. It is the psyche protecting what remains after a significant loss. The question is not whether to feel it, but how to move through it in a way that does not calcify. In a way that allows the wound to teach something without permanently determining how all future connection must be structured. Jung wrote that all the greatest and most important problems of life are fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. This is true of betrayal. You cannot solve it. You cannot reason your way out of the wound. What you can do is outgrow the version of yourself that needed to remain in that wound forever. You can allow the experience to deepen your understanding of where trust is genuinely warranted and where it is a projection of what you wish were true. You can grieve the innocence that was lost and build something in its place. Not naivety, but discernment. A more honest, more grounded capacity for connection. This takes time. It takes solitude. It takes the willingness to sit with not having the answers about who to trust and when and how much. And in the meantime, the man withdraws. He limits access. He becomes more selective, more quiet, more internal. And those who knew the more open version of him notice the change and do not understand it. The compassionate thing, the honest thing, is to understand that behind that guardedness is not a man who stopped caring. It is a man who cared enough to be genuinely hurt, who opened enough to be genuinely reached, and who is now doing the slow, serious, unspectacular work of rebuilding. Not because he is weak, but because he was real. All of these movements, the loss of recognition in his own relationships, the realization that his energy was being extracted rather than exchanged, the withdrawal from external validation, the choice of solitude over false connection, the guardedness born of genuine betrayal. These are not random. Viewed through the full scope of Jung's work, they are stages of a single and coherent process. The process Jung named individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not becoming more successful or more admired or more spiritually elevated. It is something far more specific and far more difficult. It is the process by which a person stops being primarily defined by what they were required to be, by role, by expectation, by the accumulated pressure of social life, and begins, slowly and painfully, to become who they actually are. Jung was careful to distinguish this from egotism or from a turning away from life. He wrote explicitly that individuation does not shut one out from the world, but gathers the world to oneself. The end of individuation is not a man hermetically sealed in his own interior, divorced from human contact and indifferent to others. The end is a man who is present in the world as himself, not as a construction built for others' comfort, but as a living, genuine, fully inhabited human being. But before that gathering can happen, there must first be a withdrawal, the pulling back of attention from the collective, from the noise of what everyone thinks and expects and demands, in order to begin the slow, difficult work of listening to what is actually inside. Jung used the image of the hermit to describe a particular moment in this process. Not the hermit as a permanent identity, but the hermit as a temporary state, the person who withdraws from the crowd not because they despise it, but because they need enough quiet to find the inner signal that the outer noise has been drowning out. The hermit goes into the wilderness not to stay there, but to return bearing something that could not have been found in the city. For men going through individuation, the wilderness is interior. It is the silence of no longer performing, the silence in which, perhaps for the first time in many years, They can hear their own voice speaking without interruption, without the need to translate it into something acceptable before it reaches the surface. What emerges in that silence is often uncomfortable. The individuation process requires confronting the shadow, the parts of the psyche that have been denied and suppressed because they did not fit the persona, the anger that was never allowed to exist, the grief that was carried quietly for so long it became invisible, the parts of the self that were too complex, too contradictory, too difficult to maintain in the simplified version he was performing for the world. Facing the shadow is not pleasant. Jung never pretended it was. He said that a person does not find light by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. Making the darkness conscious means being willing to sit with what is uncomfortable or painful in oneself. Not to indulge it, not to become it, but to know it, to stop pretending it is not there, to integrate it into a fuller, more honest self-understanding. But it does not need to be fixed. It needs to be understood, because individuation is not a retreat from life. It is a preparation for a different, deeper, more honest way of living it. A man who emerges from this process, who has sat in the silence, faced the shadow, stripped away enough of the persona to find the person beneath it, returns to the world changed in ways that are hard to quantify but unmistakable to experience. He speaks less, he connects less frequently, but what he speaks, what he builds in connection, is grounded in something real, in something that will not collapse when the performance is no longer sustainable. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I want to sit with that because it sounds simple, but it is not. Becoming who you truly are requires the willingness to let what no longer fits fall away, even when it hurts, even when others do not understand, even when the falling away looks from the outside like destruction. It requires the courage to be in the in-between space, the space between who you were and who you are becoming, without rushing to fill it with something familiar and safe. If you are walking this road, if you recognize in what I have described the shape of your own experience or something close to it, I want to say something directly to you. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are not becoming less. You are in the middle of something that cannot be rushed and cannot be explained from the outside, but that has its own intelligence and its own direction and its own pace. You do not have to apologize for this. You do not have to make it smaller than it is. You do not have to reassure everyone that you are still the same, because you are not. And the fact that you are not is not a problem. It is the whole point. If these words have reached you, if something in what you have heard here has touched something real, something you have been carrying quietly without the language to name it, I want to ask you to stay with it, not to resolve it, not to fix it, just to stay. Place your hand on your chest if you need to. Take a breath, and allow yourself the dignity of admitting that this is hard. That the journey toward yourself, toward the real, full, honest version of who you are, is not a comfortable journey. That the losses along the way are real losses, and they deserve to be felt as such. That the solitude is real solitude, and it deserves to be honored rather than rushed through. And then, when you are ready, not before, and not on anyone else's timeline, take the next step, which is simply this. Keep going, keep listening. Keep being willing to see clearly, even when what you see is uncomfortable. Keep choosing the truth of who you are over the performance of who you were. Because on the other side of this, on the other side of the silence and the loss and the necessary solitude and the confrontation with the shadow, is a life that is actually yours, not assembled from others' expectations, not maintained by performance, not rented from external approval, yours, built from the inside out, grounded in something that does not shift every time someone looks away. And that life, however quiet it is, however small its circle, however unglamorous its daily shape, is worth everything you are moving through to reach it. If any of this has meant something to you today, share it with someone who might need it. Not because I am telling you to, but because you know. If you have come this far, that there are other people out there walking in the same silence, carrying the same weight, needing the same permission to keep going. The journey is yours, but you do not have to walk it as if you are the only one who has ever taken this road.